Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. This is lesson number 8 of Music Theory Fundamentals, and in this video we will continue learning about intervals and focus more on the imperfect intervals. In the last lesson we introduced what intervals are and we focused on the perfect ones. Now we will look at the imperfect ones, which are the second, the third, the sixth, and the seventh. If you remember, the perfect intervals have 3 possibilities. They are either perfect, which is their default state, or augmented, or diminished. And those are for the first, the fourth, the fifth, and the eighth. The first and the eighth, we call them also unison and octave. The imperfect intervals, they have 4 possible states, and they are major and minor, so they don't have a perfect state. And from the major, we can go to augmented, and from the minor, we can go to diminished. And the major and minor, we notate them by uppercase M and lowercase m. So suppose we are starting from the major. In order to go to augmented, we do the same as with the perfect. We raise the highest note by 1 semitone. And if we want to go to the minor, we lower by 1 semitone and then by another semitone to go to diminished. And so you see here there's 2 transitional states versus what we see in the perfect, there's only 1 perfect state. When I say state, I'm referring to the quality of the interval. Again, it's very important that any adjustment should be done only through the incidentals while we keep the same letter note. This is very important in music theory and in voice leading. If we want to consider which one is the default starting point, on a major scale, the default one is the major interval. So let's start looking at some examples. First, we start with the second interval. In this example, we are in the key of F. In the first example on the left, the first note is a D, and the second note is an E. So this interval, this gap, is what we call a major second. And you can see there's a gap of 2 semitones. So 1, 2. And we write it uppercase M, 2. 2 is because it's a second, and uppercase M is because it's a major second. Now, if we lower the E by 1 semitone, we get the E flat. So the D to the E flat, they make a minor second. We indicate it with lowercase m and 2, M2. Now, back from major position, if we raise by 1 semitone, we have an E sharp. So notice it's enharmonic with F, but we still write it E sharp, even though we are in the key of F, and that's very, very important. We still write it as E sharp. Now we have an augmented second. So we write it uppercase A, you remember from previous lesson, and 2. So A2, that's an augmented second. And in the end, if we go back to the minor second, and we lower the upper note by another semitone, we would be in E double flat. Remember, we were originally here. So that's a flat, double flat. It coincides with the D, and funny enough, this is a D and coinciding with E double flat, that's a diminished second. Now, it sounds like a unison because it is, they're playing at the same time. But again, think it's different instruments playing at the same time or different voices. They're coming from different places and they're meeting here through different paths. And so that's a diminished second. A pianist, for example, playing a piano piece will never read it like this, will never see something like this. This is very specific to music theory and voice leading. Now let's look at the example on the right. In this case, we are using a new scale while we are still in the key of F. And so you see here already we're starting with incidentals. So we have F sharp and G sharp. They make a major second. Again, 2 semitones gap. Then the F sharp and G natural, they make a minor second. Then back from the major second, if we go up, we get G double sharp, because we were already at a sharp. And then from the minor second, if we go down, we will have the same sound. In this case, it's a G flat. So we have a F sharp and G flat at the same time. And so this is a diminished second. Let's move now to the third interval. In this case, we are in the key of A. We have D and F sharp. Remember, we just write it as F because we are in the key of A. There's already an accidental in the key signature. This is a major third, and we write it as uppercase M and 3, M3. And it's separated by 4 semitones. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if we lower the top note by 1 semitone, we get an F natural, and this is a minor third. Lowercase m and 3. Now, back from major position, if we raise the top note by 1 semitone, we get an augmented third. In this case, we were at an F sharp, and then we are at F double sharp. That's an augmented third. And back from the minor position, if we go down by 1 semitone, we have a diminished third. And that's a F flat. Now, you can see already some of the intervals, they can overlap with other intervals. So, for example, a diminished third is a similar interval as a major second. So they have the same gap between them. Why sometimes it's a diminished third and sometimes it's a major second? It depends really on the context, in which scale you are, in which key, and how the piece is playing. Okay? So now we move to the right side, and here we have a G natural and a B. And you see the notes, they don't have to be part of the scale. In this case, G natural is not part of this scale or this key. And so that's a major third. If we lower the top note by 1 semitone, we have a B flat, and so that's a minor third. And back from the major position, if we raise top note by 1 semitone, we have a B sharp. It coincides with the C. That's an augmented third. And if we go back to the minor position and we go down, so we have a G natural, B flat. We go down the B flat one more semitone. We have a B double flat. It coincides with A, and that's a diminished third. Again, why we call it a third is because of the numbering of the letter notes. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, octave. Now we move to the sixth. The sixth interval has 6 notes gap with 9 semitones in between. In this example, we are in the key of C. We are starting from the G, and with the E above, this interval is called a major sixth. And we write it as M6 with uppercase M. Now G and E flat is a minor sixth. And G and E sharp, which coincides with an F, is an augmented sixth. And from the minor sixth, if we go down 1 semitone, we have a G and E double flat, and that's a diminished sixth. On the right side, we have F sharp. The major sixth is with D sharp. So the minor sixth is with D natural. The augmented sixth is with D double sharp. And the diminished sixth is with D flat. And now we move to the seventh interval, which is actually one of the most interesting ones. Here we are in the key of A flat. From C to B, it's a major seventh. Now you might think like, this sounds really ugly. But you need to always consider it in context. So hear this, for example. Now suddenly it sounds nice. And so music is extremely contextual to the ear. So from this point, if we lower by 1 semitone, we get a minor seventh, and so we write it lowercase m7. Then back from the major seventh, if we raise by 1 semitone, we have an augmented seventh, which is effectively it's an octave. And from the minor seventh, if we go down one more semitone to B double flat, we have a diminished seventh. So C and B natural, C and B flat, C and B sharp. B sharp is the same as C enharmonically, and C and B double flat. In the example to the right, we have A flat and G. They make a major seventh, then A flat and G flat. They make a minor seventh, A flat and G sharp. They make an augmented seventh, and then A flat and G double flat. So we have G, G flat, G double flat. We have a diminished seventh. And there we have it. We went through all the intervals from the first unison to the eighth octave. Here's a quick mapping of all the possibilities in the key of C, and if we start from C. So we have perfect unison, augmented unison, diminished unison, major second, minor second, augmented second, diminished second, major third, minor third, augmented third, diminished third, perfect fourth, augmented fourth, diminished fourth, perfect fifth, augmented fifth, diminished fifth, major sixth, minor sixth, augmented sixth, diminished sixth, major seventh, minor seventh, augmented seventh, diminished seventh, and then in the end, perfect octave, augmented octave, and diminished octave. All those between 1 and 8 we call the simple intervals, but we have intervals above that. So we can have any two notes, any gap between two notes is an interval. So intervals above 8, they behave the same as the octaves below. So for example, if I have between C and A, okay, if I have between C and A here, it will behave the same way as the C and A here. So 9 becomes 2, 10 becomes 3, 11 becomes 4, etc. All those we call them compound intervals. Of course, we can still write them 11th, 13th, 15th, and so on, but then in terms of music theory, they behave in the same way as with simple intervals. So a couple of important points to remember about intervals. The first is that intervals can happen with any notes on any key. They don't have to be part of the scale. Here we have F sharp and D sharp. But they are on the key of C. Those two notes are not part of the C major scale. So it doesn't matter where we're at, any gap between two notes is considered an interval, no matter if we are on the same scale or not on the same scale. The second point is, if you want to correctly measure an interval, assume the lower note has its own major scale. So forget for a second in which key and scale you are. Just assume that this lower note has its own major scale, then count from there. And that makes your life really, really easier. So in the same example, the lower note here is an F sharp. So let's imagine for a split second that we are not in the key of C or C major scale. We are in the F sharp major scale. So the F sharp in this case is the tonic. So how do we reach the D sharp? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the major sixth. And from here we can assess any other variations of the sixth. And lastly, we notate according to the original key, but write accidentals according to the interval. So the notation of the letter notes are always in their correct locations on the staff, but we use accidentals when we make variations, even if that is not part of the key utilized. This helps us in understanding how the voice is leading, and it is also used in music theory and analysis. The only exception is when we see intervals adjusted to conform enharmonically to be used to the key. This is typically for pieces like playing like piano or musical instruments to make the musician's life a lot easier at reading basically the notes. In those cases, the musician is not really interested in the theory behind it, more like what is more practical to actually play in the easiest way possible and the easiest way to read the notes. In those cases, we will try to conform the notation as much as possible to the key that is being utilized. In this example here, the augmented 6 points to D double sharp, so major 6, augmented 6, which is enharmonic with E. But since we are in the C major scale, it's a lot easier to just write it as an E for the pianist to be able to play it. So for the sake of practicality, it's a lot easier to avoid extra accidentals for musicians when they need to play. And that's it for now. If you have any questions, go ahead and write it in the comment section. I'll make sure to answer as soon as I can. If you enjoyed this lesson, go ahead and subscribe. I'm trying to reach a target of 100 subscribers. Getting there. My goal is to keep posting one lesson per week to help you in your learning journey. And I wish you a fantastic musical day.